Happy Mental Health Awareness Month, everyone. I'm really grateful to be here today. May all beings be happy, and may all beings be free. The Buddha. I'd like to introduce myself to start. My name is Sunshine, a nickname that was given to me at birth by my father because he said that I never cried. I am a sister, a daughter, a stepmother, and a friend. I spent 10 years in the military and 12 years in banking and tech as a project manager and process improvement coach. And my academic background is in psychology. Community is very, very important to me, and I have a deep sense of compassion for the homeless and for all who struggle with mental illness, regardless of socioeconomic status. I am passionate about good music. I love animals and nature, and I'm a heartfelt two-step country dancer. And although I've never been challenged by substance use in particular, I do understand the pain of addiction. Alcoholism touches every generation of my family since my great-grandfather, and I myself struggled with food addiction for decades. I believe that suffering is a part of being human, and that feeling whole is a human right. And while I have experienced deep trauma myself, from starvation, neglect, sexual abuse, sexual violence, homelessness, and physical injury, as I continue to work through the most difficult of my experiences with kindness and compassion, I have tapped into a resilience in myself that is my source for deep power, wisdom, and clarity. I'd like to self-disclose something for the purpose of authenticity. As I share, before we get into the topics of mental health and mental wellness today, I'm sharing this because although it's still vulnerable for me to talk about it, I find that if I don't mention this, I don't feel aligned when sharing from my heart. 2 years ago, I began hearing a voice. Today, I call this voice Spirit, and Spirit teaches me about universal love and compassion in my dreams, and also uses my dreams to gently make me aware of my blind spots. Spirit also communicates with me through visions and clairaudience, while meditating, falling asleep, and sometimes in broad daylight. While I haven't necessarily adopted the identity of spiritual medium, I cannot deny that what I experience is mediumship. Spirit and I have developed a very relaxed and emotionally intimate relationship with each other. We've been through a lot, so I'd feel inauthentic talking about mental health without mentioning Spirit, since it's this relationship that has helped me more than any other on my own healing journey. If you'd like to know more about my mental health story, you can find me on YouTube under Sunshine_Grace, a channel that's dedicated to talking candidly about the intersection between mental health and spirituality. Okay, now that that's out of the way, I feel like I have the freedom to sprinkle in some of my conversations with Spirit, which makes me feel more comfortable with you. Accepting my trauma and feeling empowered to change it. Today, it's pretty widely accepted that no one gets out of childhood unscathed. Loneliness, fear, grief, and shock seem to be as part of the human experience, as much as love, joy, and peace. I remember the very day when I recognized the harsh reality of living through a lifetime of trauma myself. Ooh, I'm getting emotional just saying that. Excuse me. I was lying in bed one morning, surfing the web on my phone and nursing the tail end of a migraine. I decided to take the ACE test, which you may be familiar with. It's otherwise known as Adverse Childhood Experiences Test. This test measures shocking or scary events such as physical, sexual, and psychological abuse, and physical and emotional neglect. The ACE test assigns a point for each traumatic event, regardless of how many times that event has occurred. I think this is a huge flaw in the test myself, but that's besides the point. The maximum number of points that you can score is 10, and the minimum is 1. Lying there in bed, I remember when the page on my phone loaded to reveal my final ACE score. I saw that my score was, drumroll, a 9. And my jaw dropped. I couldn't believe that me, a person who felt survivor's guilt for getting out of the neighborhood I'd grown up in, a person who had a college education and seemed to be functioning well, was a 9. This put me in the category of top 13% of the population for trauma. My initial thought was, wow, am I really that damaged? But after processing this more, I began to feel deep, deep compassion for my younger selves and for the adult I was now, who was still carrying it. It wasn't easy to see myself as someone who'd been through so much pain. But in a way, things started to make sense. No wonder I'd had a lifetime of depression, a crippling sense of loneliness and isolation, suicidal ideation, and low self-worth. I thought, and that morning I began to see that I could actually link my unhappiness, mostly my depression, to my traumatic experiences, which was new for me, and it made me feel empowered. If I knew what caused my unhappiness, maybe I could actually fix it. It was as if I had suddenly become aware of a pinprick of light at the end of the tunnel. And while I don't believe that we ever erase our past, no matter how enlightened we are, I do believe that with patience, persistence, and a supportive environment, that it's possible to fully recover from trauma and live a happy life. And I also believe that despite the fact that we live in a culture that tolerates chronic stress, we're also living in a day and age where tools for self-healing are more accessible than ever. For me, accepting my trauma was the first step in my healing journey. Another step in my healing journey was to examine my life for what is called ongoing stressors. Ongoing stressors are daily stressful events that can reduce one's ability to cope with stress overall. I decided to remove as many of these as possible. I didn't make a conscious plan to do this. It just happened intuitively. Perhaps from a lifetime of stress, I decided it was time to chill. Somehow I knew that all of the noise of the outside world had to be turned down in order for me to create the space I needed to turn my attention inward towards healing. Somewhere along the way, I was surprised to discover that what causes unwellness isn't universally agreed upon, and this made me curious. This is what I'd like to explore next: how trauma is viewed through different lenses. My hope is that by providing this larger context, we can be reminded how universal it is to suffer, and that we are not alone in our suffering. Why view trauma through different cultural lenses? We have all been so conditioned that it's easy to forget that we have free will to choose what we believe. In grad school, we learned about cross-cultural research, also known as comparative studies. The idea behind this type of research is to, through comparison of different cultural views, be able to highlight different cultures' biases and values that may color or distort a more holistic view of reality. On my own healing journey, when I need to understand myself, I enjoy trying on different perspectives to understand the truth of who I am. Like trying on different pairs of glasses, I can see myself through various lenses. I find it helpful to discard the lenses that don't align with my experience and intuition and adopt the ones that do, providing a more holistic or universal picture of myself. So I'd like to talk a little bit about how trauma is seen through different cultures, and then explore different cultural approaches to the healing process. Explanatory models of trauma. Different cultures have different explanations for what causes trauma and illness in general. In some folk traditions, for example, they believe illness is caused by supernatural forces. In one example, in the Abrahamic Bible, God sent a flood to cleanse the earth, wiping out most of life on the planet. In some communities, they see trauma as a result of a curse. According to the Rig Veda, an ancient Hindu text, all suffering is the result of karma. In individualistic-based societies, trauma is personalized. Yet in communalistic societies, trauma is experienced collectively, as in famine that affects the entire village, making it less personal. In shamanic societies, shamans are judged by their effectiveness in healing, just as a surgeon is judged by her ability to perform surgery. And in some shamanic cultures, what we would call trauma is sometimes referred to as soul loss. Soul loss is a term used to describe the fragmentation or departure of a person's soul, often due to a frightening experience, like the death of a loved one. Shamans believe that these situations can cause a loss of energy, where part of the soul's energy splits off from the core person and becomes stuck in the time and place of the trauma. This can lead to the feeling that we're missing a part of us. What in the West we may think of as manifesting as disassociation or depression or a disconnection from the harmony of life. The role of the shaman is to enter into an altered state of consciousness in order to travel back in time to the scene of the event, often guided by spirits. The shaman recovers the lost soul part and returns it back to the individual for a full feeling of more wholeness. In this approach, the shaman is working with the spiritual energy of a person. In some communities in India, they view trauma through the lens of a concept called samskaras. I loved learning about samskaras. To me, it's a fascinating concept. Samskaras are mental impressions or recollections of events. According to this lens, we cling to the pleasurable experience, like a parent telling us we're a good child for sharing our toys. And we resist the unpleasant ones, like being scolded and feeling ashamed. Over time, these mental impressions accumulate, forming our identity. This misidentification with our experiences of reality distorts our view of ourself, which, according to many wisdom traditions in the Far East, is pure consciousness. Here in the West, psychotherapist, educator, and author Peter Levine defines trauma as a psychological event that is perceived as a threat that one is unable to complete a satisfactory fight, flight, or freeze response to. And one of his peers, Dutch-born psychologist, researcher, and author of The Body Keeps the Score, Bessel van der Kolk, defines trauma as not the story of something that happened in the past, but the current imprint of that pain and horror and fear living inside the individual today. So now that we've talked a little bit about different ways of seeing how trauma is caused, let's talk about feeling better. Finding peace in a fast-paced world, the basics. As Bessel van der Kolk said, if we come from trauma, we may not trust peace. This quote points out that sometimes it takes reorientating towards peace as being possible before we even begin to pursue a life of harmony. Once we know that peace is a possibility, then it becomes a matter of how do I regulate my nervous system in a fast-paced world? If I look towards nature, I see that nature isn't always growing. There are seasons, and the winter season gives space to just be, just as the night gives time for plants and animals to sleep. I can see that burnout happens when we don't honor the natural beingness cycles in our day, our week, and our year. Always on the go, never listening. Always planning, never sitting. And yet healers have known since the beginning of time that we need one thing to begin to heal, and that is to feel safe and calm in our bodies. At first, my healing journey had to begin with this basic. This was not a conscious plan. I just somehow knew that I needed to create space for rest and silence in my life. And so in 2018, I began removing everything from my environment that caused stress or distraction from focusing on my mental health. I cut out television and my XM radio subscription and started canceling subscriptions and commitments left and right. I simplified my daily routine and I threw out anything that wasn't essential. That made a big difference to my sense of peace, but removing inanimate objects was also pretty straightforward. Removing people or distancing from certain relationships is harder. Distancing from my own mind was the hardest of all. For me, this is where boundaries come in. Boundary setting, not just in terms of time management, but specifically in terms of relationships, is an ongoing development of attuning to my own intuition about what feels supportive and loving and what doesn't. Reading the book Attached shed a lot of light on old patterns that were subconsciously driving my choices in romantic relationships. And I slowly began to break out of old conditioning that had created an identity around someone who is abandoned. In addition to creating a peaceful environment and setting boundaries in my relationships, I recognized early on that I had to make changes in my lifestyle. Luckily, I've always been pretty good at consistent exercise and pretty disciplined at diet. But when you're feeling depressed and disconnected, even basic self-grooming can be difficult. One time, when I was going through a phase of being very physically ill and extremely depressed and confused, I got a tip from Spirit that helped me feel less overwhelmed with maintaining my self-care routine. Spirit said, "Would you like me to help you decide how to manage your stress?" "Yes, please," I said. And Spirit said, "Go from task to task, asking yourself, what is the most loving thing I can do for myself in this moment?" And with this guidance, I learned to not plan my day. Outside of appointments or commitments that couldn't be moved, I began ignoring my entire to-do list and making moment-to-moment decisions based on what was most essential for my health and well-being in that moment. Going from task to task like this taught me how much I can trust myself to take care of myself. What I've always struggled with more than diet and exercise, however, is a good bedtime routine. While I avoided going to bed at a decent hour my entire life because of having severe sleep anxiety from childhood trauma, through trial and error, I found out that doing things like steeping some chamomile tea an hour before my target bedtime, and swapping my phone for a book, and lighting some incense, and lowering the lights, and putting on my favorite jazz, I slowly but surely began recovering from my sleep anxiety. And this one thing, prioritizing a bedtime routine, has caused an unimaginably big shift in my well-being. It took me about a year of protecting my new, quiet, safe space, and then earning my own trust to take good care of my body. But eventually, I felt ready to learn more advanced tools for healing. And that's what I'd like to talk about next. Advanced tools for well-being. We now know that healing requires one thing: a calm, peaceful environment. And once we begin to feel we have strength, we learn how to create that environment within us. I call this bringing the altar inside. I think we're starting to awaken in the West to the memory of how powerful we are as our own healers. We're remembering that the mind, body, heart, and spirit are all connected. And we're seeing again that in a peaceful state, the body can naturally heal from disease. A fractured mind can reorientate, and the heart will purge and mend on its own. So although these are still considered alternative medicine practices by conventional views, the following cutting-edge and advanced tools have been around as long as we've been human. Like any new tool, there may be a learning curve to using these, but the more we develop the muscle of connecting to the deep wisdom of our heart and intuition, the more they become first nature. So I've listed 3 advanced tools, and I go into depth on the third one. The first one is meditation. Meditation is practiced by an estimated 500 million people worldwide. This is 1 in 16 people. Astonishing. Fundamentally speaking, it is resting in presence. Do you guys want to try it for a moment? Yeah? You guys all look so peaceful. I hate to break up your moment. Did anybody hear the air conditioner running? Anybody? You heard the fan. Okay. That's a good example of resting in presence. It's more just through our senses: sight, sound, touch, taste, and smell, what's around us in the environment. Many wisdom traditions in the Far East use meditation to train the mind to do what's called single-pointed meditation, which is focusing one's awareness like a flashlight on a single object, like the breath or like to music, to allow one to slowly stop identifying with our thoughts which we begin to see arise spontaneously. This practice of unbecoming requires a commitment. And while many Westerners struggle with stillness because our society values doing and not being, it is, in my opinion, the single most transformative tool for mastering the mind-body connection and learning how to make the mind a servant to the heart. Meditation isn't just a tool of the mind, however. When applied with intention, it can heal the heart as well. Metta, or loving kindness, is a special form of meditation that I found to be powerful at not just calming my mind, but cultivating a sense of compassion and love in the body for self and others. An example of one person who was great at using metta to heal trauma was Thich Nhat Hanh. Has anybody heard of him? Spiritual teacher? He passed away in 2022. He used to talk about turning the muck and the mud, our anger, shame, and grief, into a lotus flower. I love that imagery. Another advanced tool I like to use is heart work. I call heart work the hard work because it requires us to have the courage to hold presence, that moment of meditation we were doing, that still, calm energy, for our parts that feel scared, abandoned, and alone. So until we develop tools that bring ease into the process through the calmness of the breath, feeling our feelings can often feel scary and overwhelming. For me, this really comes down to a lot of pain, heartbreak, and disappointment. And for a long time, I didn't know that there is a muscle that you can develop to do this work. Over time, I've gotten good at negotiating with my body how much it can handle processing pain through a good cry, and developing the sense of intuition about when, how, where, and how much I can cry has created a sense of safety in my body and trust that my body has, that I will only ask it to process what it can handle. Crying is personal, and I want to be able to control who I allow access to those more vulnerable parts of me. I've been practicing this discernment and using this muscle to open the heart and let the pain pour out for 2 years now, and it's been a powerful form of self-healing. The third advanced tool is what I call intelligence in the body. We now know from decades of research that we can't separate the mind, body, heart, and spirit. They each affect each other. And so it should come as no surprise to us that trauma is actually stored in the physical body, not just in our mind or thought patterns. It's actually here inside of us. More specifically, deep trauma is stored deep in the heart. Learning to connect with my body and earning the trust of my body has been powerful because it has allowed me to take my healing journey at the pace of my body, not my mind. There are some fabulous tools I've discovered over the years that teach people how to connect with the intelligence of their bodies, which show us how to heal. Most of these use a multidisciplinary approach to healing, combining elements of psychological, focused cognition or awareness, and somatic awareness, meaning the body's awareness, to identify and dissolve trauma stored in the body. Once taught how to do this myself, I've found that these approaches are very accessible. Here are a few of my favorites, but don't let the fact that these advanced tools seem to require training make you feel intimidated. Often, just moving the body, as in going for a walk or a run, can move stuck emotions by shifting our hormones and thought patterns. Healing doesn't have to be complicated. So the first intelligence body tool is in John Prendergast's book, The Deep Heart, Our Portal to Presence. He talks about core limiting beliefs. These are beliefs that limit our view of reality and are a core identity of ours, such as I'm not worthy of love, or everybody leaves me. Prendergast has come up with his own process to guide people by using psychology and focused awareness to connect their bodies in a relaxed state, to find and then dislodge these distorted beliefs from their belief system. In a similar fashion, Dr. Richard Schwartz's internal family systems theory, or IFS, uses a blend of self-inquiry and embodiment work to safely and calmly locate wounded parts of us that need our love and compassion to be seen and transformed. With this methodology, there are 8 C words that serve as anchors for describing the ideal mindset to adopt when we're doing this delicate work. These include compassion, curiosity, clarity, creativity, calmness, confidence, courage, and connectedness. Peter Levine's somatic experiencing methodology uses the mind to direct the individual's attention to internal body sensations, like the stress I feel in my shoulders right now, and then physically release blocked emotions like fear or shame that accumulate in the body in those areas. Another example is Gary Craig's emotional freedom technique, otherwise known as tapping. Tapping combines focused attention and tapping on one's own body's acupuncture points to short-circuit thoughts that lead to stress and anxiety in the body and help us ground. These advanced tools are wonderful for self-healing, but sometimes we need more support. And in looking at different communities' approaches to the role of community in healing the individual, I've noticed a spectrum of some communities being very involved in healing their members and other communities not being involved. The role of community in healing individuals. In many cultures that view that the individual as a part of a larger whole, such as in what's called collectivistic societies, are more likely to prioritize healing in the individual because they know that if you heal, I heal. How can this be true? Well, we all have families that we interact with. And if we are in a calm, clear space of compassion, and someone in our family is under stress, we can be present with them in that moment and hold that person in that stressful situation, which then brings them to a calm place. But if there's nobody in our family who can be in a state of calm, then we're constantly feeding off of each other's stress. This is why so many collectivistic communities set aside time to heal together through ceremony and rites of passage. Native American communities and other indigenous societies are well known for creating sacred and safe spaces where the community comes together to heal themselves. Unfortunately, healing ceremonies are not yet a prevalent part of our customs in mainstream Western society. We assume, incorrectly, that if someone wants to heal emotionally, they're on a solo journey. I do believe that, though, this is changing. Through science and research, we are starting to understand both the strengths and limitations of individualism. And through a growing body of research by people like Austrian author Thomas Hubble, we know that we can feel the impact and effects of trauma even if we don't experience it directly. How can this be true? Well, if if my mother experiences the lack of presence from her mother or father during the scariest moments of her life, she holds that trauma, that sense of loneliness when things are hard in her body. And I, as a fetus, live in that body and absorb that energy. This understanding is causing a profound shift in the way that we see trauma as being a result of not just individual experiences, but familial, community, and collective experiences as whole societies. The field of epigenetics reflects this same finding, that ancestral trauma and secondary trauma are real. And all of this research is highlighting the importance of slowing down, creating safe spaces, gathering in community, and transforming the world from the inside out. In conclusion, of course, it's natural to ask oneself, is all this healing work really worth it? I've been examining this question in my own life lately. Do I really have more peace, more joyfulness, more playfulness, more creativity? Is there more harmony in my relationships? I am 6 years into my healing journey now, and the authors, speakers, educators, and spiritual teachers I respect most have had the courage to speak openly and publicly about their own trauma. And this motivates me to continue on my path. But there are things that I'm actively working on healing still. Of course, I still carry grief, anger, and shame. But I've noticed that a lot of the fear in me has dissipated. And for me, the answer to the question of, is this all really worth it? Will I ever find peace? Is yes. Not only do I have more peace and joy, but I have noticed other significant shifts in my thoughts, behavior, and emotions. For example, here are just a few of the ways that staying on this path to healing and self-liberation has impacted me. Many of the controlling and neurotic behaviors I used to do to help me feel safe have fallen away effortlessly. Since committing to prioritizing my sleep through a disciplined bedtime routine and taking naps or resting when I am tired, I regularly keep myself out of the red zone for mental health and raise my overall baseline of wellness. I am able to be with my emotions, no matter how painful, without judgment, staying curious and present with them, which allows emotions to move through me instead of getting stuck inside of me. I have healed from a lot of shame, so when I make a mistake, I can see how it impacts others and own my error without feeling a loss of dignity. When I encounter a challenge now, instead of feeling defeated and resigned to collapsing into a ball of loss, I can rationally assess the situation and move to acceptance more quickly, and then decide how and what action to take. My thoughts are more intentional and my thinking is more clear. Of course, I still have bad days where I feel alone or the inner critic appears, but I'm learning to embrace and love myself deeply, including the inner critic, even on my bad days. More than anything, I know myself really, really well now. I know how my personality is hardwired, how my unique quirks that make me me. And I know my gifts and strengths and my ugly parts. And I've learned to truly, really like who I am. And this the feeling of deep, unconditional self-love, self-acceptance, and self-appreciation is new, exciting, and liberating for me. What I'm discovering is that since I began this journey 6 years ago, but especially in this past year, I have had more days when life feels like it's opening up before my eyes, that it's unfolding right in front of me. On these days, there's a current of life that I can feel myself in, and it carries me and everything else effortlessly down a stream. In this state of beingness, I have a deep connection with the present moment and a deep intimacy with everything around me. The birdsong, the flow of traffic, the flowers, the butterflies, people walking by. And I can feel the love that flows through everything and surrounds everything. These moments are filled with a deep sense of peace and a higher purpose for everything, and an intelligence in the design of life that is so perfect, it blows my mind and brings tears of beauty and appreciation to my eyes. Lastly, I'd like to touch on the connection between heart work and spirituality for a moment. And please forgive me if you're not spiritual. I have always felt that spiritual freedom and emotional healing are parallel, but separate. What I mean by this is that we can be spiritually awake, but emotionally very wounded. And on the flip side, we can be emotionally mature, but spiritually asleep. But then one day, about a month ago, Spirit said something powerful that changed the way I see the mechanism that connects these two parallel paths. Spirit said, "Do you see that you underestimate the impact of emotional healing on spiritual self-realization?" Wow, what a statement. Thinking this through, though, I believe that when we do our heart work, it frees up energy within us that we were using to maintain the barrier around our hearts, in order to not allow anything to poke what's tender in there. And because energy always needs somewhere to go, when we don't have to hold up those walls protecting our heart anymore, we have this extra energy for being present in life, in the here and now. For me, this is how and why healing my trauma lends to feeling more connected and at peace with life. And with that, I'd like to finish by reading a poem from Thich Nhat Hanh that always touches an edge for me between the bittersweetness of life and a deep knowing in me that everything is already okay. This poem is called Oneness, and it was written by hand in beautiful calligraphy and posted in Plum Village Monastery in France by a friend of Ty's. Oneness. The moment I die, I will try to come back to you as quickly as possible. I promise it will not take long. Isn't it true I am already with you in every moment? I come back to you in every moment. Just look, feel my presence. If you want to cry, please cry. And know that I will cry with you. The tears you shed will heal us both. Your tears are mine. The earth I tread this morning transcends history. Spring and winter are both present in the moment. The young leaf and the dead leaf are really one. My feet touch deathlessness, and my feet are yours. Walk with me now. Let us enter the dimension of oneness and see the cherry tree blossom in winter. Why should we talk about death? I don't need to die to be back with you. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening, for your cherished ears. So appreciate you.